Much for stopping by the Digital Creator Daily. If you're new here, I'm Rob from Hey Summit, and this is the daily-ish show where I get to have awesome conversations with brilliant people doing really interesting things. We talk about the creator mindset, staying authentic, assembling your toolkit, exploring platforms, and a whole lot more. It's a pretty relaxed show about and for creators, thought leaders, and independent entrepreneurs. And just a reminder, conversation is best, like a good wine, is best when it's shared. So however you're tuning in, please feel free to jump in with your thoughts, questions, and perspectives. And thanks very much for spending some time with us. Today, I'm really happy to welcome Ryan Wardell to the show. Ryan is the CEO and founder of Startup Sauce, a community for SaaS entrepreneurs, that's software as a service entrepreneurs, based outside of Silicon Valley. Prior to this, Ryan ran a marketing agency for startups based in London and also mentored a number of startup accelerators in Australia, the US, and Europe. Welcome, Ryan. Thanks so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Pleasure to be here.
So obviously, we know each other pretty well, but I'd love to kind of get a sense of your journey from, first off, like having your own startup, having your own business. So you sold that, right? So walk me through the journey that you went from selling a business to starting Startup Sauce. Like what went into that, and why did you feel like this was something you wanted to do?
Okay, so I sold my previous startup, and look, it was a little bit of money. It wasn't a life-changing amount of money or anything.
Sure.
It was enough to go on
$2 billion.
Something like that. Yeah, sure. We'll say $2 billion. Sure. Let's do that. It was enough to kind of just sort of think about what I wanted to do next. Now, when I was in Australia, I was sort of dabbling in a few other things. I ran a little event for a while called Co-Founder Speed Date. So we were connecting hackers with hustlers so that they could start new companies, and that was kind of interesting. So I was sort of doing all the community stuff then. But I had this idea that Australia was a bit of a small stomping ground, and I had this, kid in my 20s. You read about stuff in TechCrunch. I wanted to get over to Silicon Valley and sort of see, what was that like? And so I was kicking around trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do, and I had a couple of freelance clients. I was just doing some like stand-in marketing work for them on a part-time basis, and I kind of had this epiphany one day. Thinking, look, I was thinking about doing a new startup or something like that in Australia. And then I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, look, like, you don't have a girlfriend, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have any kids that you know about. You've got these freelance clients, but you haven't met two of them face to face. Like they're not in Sydney. Why are you still here? Why don't you? And I was about 28 at the time, and that I just had that thought in the back of my head. It's like you never get this perfect window where all the stars kind of align and you can just go and see the world. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go and do that. So the aim was to get over to Silicon Valley, meet lots of people, maybe come up with a business idea or start someone, or just like meet, whenever the idea came along, I wanted to have my bench kind of stacked. I wanted to meet all the investors and journalists and developers and all the people that I would need. So I was going to go and do that. But before I got over there, I wanted to have the income situation sorted. So I was doing some freelancing, and that was fine. But anyone who's done some freelancing knows it's kind of up and down, and you're constantly chasing clients, and then you finish the project, and then you got to go and find more clients and stuff again. So I went from Sydney to Chiang Mai in Thailand, and at the time that was kind of ground zero for digital nomads. And a few reasons for that, like, climate's pretty good, it's pretty cheap. The internet in Chiang Mai was better than the internet I could get back in Australia, funnily enough.
Wow.
So I was in Chiang Mai, and the plan was to start, like, really find some sort of business or turn it into something more than freelancing. I didn't quite manage to get there, and after a while I got sick of Thailand and had to leave, so I went over to the States anyway. So I landed in Silicon Valley. Well, I flew into San Francisco, and it was not what I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
And a lot of people have told me exactly the same thing. That they build it up in their minds. They get there and they think there's going to be like all these amazing smart people, and like there are a lot of smart, ambitious people there. And you go to a coffee shop and someone over there is talking about how they're going to mine asteroids, and someone over there is talking about how they've already cured cancer. They just need to get it out to the masses and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of really smart, successful, ambitious people there, but it's a really insular place, or at least I found it to be quite a bubble. all people talk about there was just tech, and specifically the tech they're building in Silicon Valley. They're completely oblivious to what was going on. And coming from Australia, it was like, okay, well, there's some interesting stuff going on here. I'm sure there's interesting stuff going on in Europe. There's interesting stuff going on in other parts of the US and Canada and China and all around the world. Is this really where I want to be? And it's also, it's grey and foggy and miserable. And as a single bloke, it's not like the gender ratio is a little bit skewed in Silicon Valley. So if geeky computer guys are your thing, then it's probably great. Not really my thing. So it wasn't really for me, and I kind of had to go and do some soul searching. I was running out of money too, so I'd lost all my freelance clients by this point. San Francisco is a really expensive city, so I thought, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fly down to Mexico and just figure things out. And that was probably the point where I was really burnt out by that point. Like, I've been trying a few things and nothing was really working, and I've been traveling on my own for a bit, and that can get pretty exhausting and pretty lonely too when you've been doing it it's probably about a year in by this point. So I was down in Mexico. I didn't speak a word of Spanish, and so that made things a little bit challenging. So I spent a couple of months there just trying to figure out what the next steps were, and eventually kind of thought, okay, well, maybe Silicon Valley is not where I wanted to be. Let's go over to Europe. So spent a bit of time bouncing around Europe. I met a guy, reconnected with an old mate of mine, a dude I met on a rooftop in Thailand, because there was a bar there, as you do. This little Welsh guy named Sam. So he and I started a consulting business in London. And I moved to London because Sam was from the UK, and I thought, okay, well, I'm sick of traveling around my own. I'll go here. So to answer your question, just coming back to that whole kind of community thing, I sort of fell into it a little bit. Like, I'd done a few kind of community things back in Australia. I thought I was reasonably good at it. I always, what's that book where they talk about mavens, connectors, and salespeople? I always thought of myself as being more of a connector. I really liked meeting interesting people, figuring out what made them tick, and then helping them meet other interesting people so they could work together. I'd done, setting up a lot of intros and helping people meet people. When I was in London, we were running this consulting business. So what we were doing is we would work with funded startups, and we'd help them figure out their marketing channels. And usually, we might test out 5 different channels, and maybe one of them looked like it was viable. So the challenge with that is we had some awesome clients, but a lot of the people that we were talking to really didn't have a proper business. They'd managed to raise some money, but they didn't really have anything that was working. They didn't have product market fit. And so there's a lot of pressure on us to try and make something fly when it didn't have wings and it didn't have an engine, it didn't have all the important parts that you need. So that was quite a frustrating experience. And I think a lot of people who have done freelancing or consulting or built an agency, like service businesses, are hard for that reason. Now, a number of things kind of all happened at once that sort of led us onto this community path. So first thing that happened is my visa got rejected. So I applied to stay in the UK, and I couldn't. So I had to leave at some point. And the business at that point kind of relied on me being in London doing sales face-to-face, meeting clients and all that kind of stuff. And my co-founder Sam sales wasn't his thing. He didn't really want to do that. At the same time, my co-founder Sam had joined a group called the Iron Council, which is like a personal development group, specifically for guys. So it's positive masculine. A bunch of these guys in the group, they want to figure out their career and make more money. Most of them were married, had kids. They wanted to improve their relationships with their families. They wanted to get into better shape, all that kind of stuff. So that there was this online group where they would, provide support and stuff like that. He said, Ryan, this group's awesome. We should do something like this for startups or for entrepreneurs. And at the same time, we'd been talking to some SaaS founders in London, and they hadn't raised any money, but they had customers, they had revenue, they had real businesses. People who actually found value in what they were doing. And so we started meeting up with them sort of face-to-face for breakfast and having a bit of a chat. We thought we could help them with some marketing, and maybe we could learn something about building a SaaS company. So we kind of put those 2 things together. We thought, okay, well, is there a community out there? Because it feels like there should be a community out there for people like this. Because if we've got almost like a face-to-face community, we're meeting up discussing business and marketing and ideas and all that kind of stuff. Surely there's something online that does this. And when we looked around, so there are lots of Facebook groups, and some of them big, some of them are small, some of them there's different kind of flavors and stuff like that. But a Facebook group is not a community. A Facebook group is a lot of people with shared interests that kind of are all broadcasting all at once. And it's very easy to just dip in and out of it. You don't really have any skin in the game. You don't really know anyone in there beyond the sort of surface level. You know, it's quite impersonal. And so we looked at a few other kind of paid communities and stuff like that. And none of them were very specifically for SaaS. And we thought, okay, well, like let's try this out. So I had a mentor once upon a time who told me something that I thought was great. He said, whenever you're testing out a new business idea, so you spend up to $1,000 testing it out, and you spend a maximum of 3 months testing it out. And if you spend $1,000 and you've invested 3 months of your life, if you haven't got any paying customers or you haven't got any evidence that this is going to be a thing, just skip it and move on, because there's always another idea out there. So we thought, okay, well, let's take this approach. So we're going to spend up to $1,000, 3 months. Let's see if we can get some paying customers. So what I did, and I if I had my time over again, I probably would have taken a better approach to this. But what I did was jumped on a few of those. We'll loop back to that in a second, I'm sure. But went to a few Facebook groups, saw some people who were SaaS founders talking about a few problems that they had. Dropped them a DM and offered to kind of get on a phone call, talk them through some of the issues. And then I mentioned, hey, look, we're thinking about getting this group together. If we got a group of other SaaS founders together, would you be interested in joining it? And we do, this kind of mastermind calls or something like that periodically. And they said, yeah, okay, that sounds interesting. It's okay. Would you pay for it? It's this much right here. And quite a lot of people said no, but a few people said yes. And we were trying to think, okay, what's the minimum viable product? What's the minimum viable community that we could have? And so we launched with 4 people in a Slack group. Now, 4 people in a Slack group kind of sucks, right? Like there's not a lot that you can talk about with 4 people in that. So we thought, okay, this is not enough. It can't just be a Slack group because nobody's can do anything there. So we need to, if we can't go broad, can we go deep? So what can we do to help these 4 people have the best experience possible? And so that meant getting on phone calls, helping them meet each other, talking through problems. We wanted to bring a lot of our kind of marketing expertise to the table, because that was a lot of the problems that these guys had revolved around, finding new customers and getting them to convert into paying customers and all that kind of stuff. So we started with 4 and that was okay. And then we thought, okay, we still need to grow this. So we did. So we're about 80 members now. So it's not a massive group, but one of the things that I think we've done really well with this group is we have turned it into a legitimate community. So people know each other, people care about each other, people have conversations without us even knowing about it. There was one guy who joined the group a little while back and said, look, I don't really join groups. I'm not really a community guy. I joined this one on a whim. I had one conversation. I've doubled my monthly recurring revenue now on the basis of that one conversation, because I got some really useful advice. Now the guy who gave him that advice, he didn't have to. He didn't get paid for it. It wasn't anything like that. He just saw another founder, wanted to help out, had some advice for him. And so we've kind of taken this approach that, if you pay it forward, everyone's got knowledge and expertise and stuff like that. And if you see an opportunity to help someone else out, please jump in and do that. And then everyone else kind of does that. So while there's lots of Facebook groups out there that are much bigger than we are, what we've got is a lot deeper, and you've got a lot of people who show up to calls 3 years later, show up to calls regularly, people who will jump in and help each other out. We've seen people form partnerships and work together and do all sorts of interesting things. We're kind of at the point now where it's probably the world's longest beta test. We wanted to tinker with it a little bit before we properly started marketing it. But I suppose if I was to flip things over about what I've learned along the way, and if anyone watching this is thinking about starting a community as well, I think that whole personal relationship stuff is the bread and butter of a successful community. So one of the things that we've tried doing is whenever someone joins, we try and introduce them one-on-one to 2 or 3 other members who are best positioned to help them. Now, you don't get that if you join a Facebook group. You don't get that if you join most other, coaching groups or anything like that. But the critical mass side of things, I think, is something that we underestimated. So what you will normally see, the normal approach with building groups, is you start off with content. Based on the content,
as in you're seeding the content and you're getting people engaged.
Yes, exactly. So we started with community, and then we're having to backfill all of this other stuff. In hindsight, I think what we probably should have done is take a more conventional approach. So you start with content, and then you build up a bit of a following. You convert that into an email list. You build an email list or a following on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook or some other social channel. And then once you've got enough people on that people list, then you switch over and you say, hey guys, we're going to launch a group now. Why don't you all come and join? And you get a big rush of people all at once. And then you've got this critical mass for people to get to know each other, and you start with some momentum. One of the problems that we found early on is, like, we had to, it was really slow trying to build that momentum to begin with.
And thinking back to your mentor's suggestion about $1,000 in 3 months, and I know you said if you don't have any paying customers, but at what point, how did you come up with the idea of, or the determination of, we're going to keep doing this, right? Like what was the cutoff? Was it 4? Was it 20? Was it not actually a financial thing? It was a different thing. Like what was the indicator of success in the early days for you?
So we kind of looked at it and we thought, okay, well, there's in these Facebook groups that we were looking at, there was 10 or 20,000 people in those groups that were all allegedly SaaS founders. We thought, okay, so there are allegedly. At least 20,000 alleged SaaS founders who find value in being part of some kind of community. And all we've done is get on a few phone calls with these guys, and we managed to get Forward to pay us some money for the promise of being able to connect with other SaaS founders and learn from them as well. And we thought, okay, maybe that's enough. So I think 1 paying customer is a fluke. 2 is a coincidence. 3 or more is a pattern. So when we got to 4, we thought, okay, this is probably enough. 4 founders on a call plus us is probably enough for an interesting discussion. And given that there's a few other indications that there's a big enough market here, or there's enough demand for it here, let's start with that and see if we can go from there.
So you got those 4, then you were actually quite happy with that, to say, you know what, yeah, we're gonna actually put in a lot more investment just in terms of time and energy. Because I imagine, like, it's doubly hard with community, because community is the product. You're not creating a SaaS product that you're just rolling out, and those 4 people you can analyze and then just, I don't know, create an ad campaign for, and the fact of them remaining as customers is reliant on you actually having more people on there. So I think that a lot of people maybe watching might be thinking, oh, can I create a community? And they're thinking about the fact that a community is, I guess they're worried about exactly what you're saying. You have a few people get started, or you start off there, and then it stops and starts and stops and starts. At what point do you pull the trigger and actually start the community? Do you hold back and actually just focus on building up your audience? Does that mean that you'll never get started, in the first place? I know that you probably would go back and do things differently, as you said, but are there, from a financial perspective, I guess, has it been effective in terms of the order of things, or would you approach the idea of even launching a community in a different way at a different stage of the business?
So I think there's a couple of things there. The first bit is it was a side project for the first couple of years.
Okay.
Even. So we still had the consulting business. We still had some clients from that. We were still using the revenue from that. I think we'd just gone stone cold into community with no other revenue coming in. Would have been really hard to sustain that without having very deep pockets or raising some money or some other kind of revenue stream. I was also fortunate that I had a business partner. Like we later actually split things up because we had differences of opinion on where we should go with it. But if I was a solo founder, I don't think you can just launch a community off the bat. Yeah. I think you need some other revenue stream. You need some other source of income coming in, because the amount of time and effort and work involved with a community of 4 people is the same as a community of 100 people or 400 people even. It's quite a lot to begin with, and it is basically it's basically a full-time job. So we were doing just enough to kind of keep people interested. But the other thing that I think we did right that might be worth thinking about as well is just setting some expectations to begin with. So what we told these guys is, hey, look, we're thinking about getting this group together. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know what it's going to look like.
You're not going to have 1,000 people in there on day one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. What we'll do is we'll offer like, a crazy low price. It's just take a punt on it, basically. Now, going from 4 to 10, that was a really difficult sales call because again, it's like you're selling the vision of what it could be rather than what it is right now. Now, I think fortunately the audience that we were going after, when you're talking to entrepreneurs, they can see the long-term vision, and quite a lot of people are like, okay, that sounds like something I would like to be a part of. Sure, sign me up now. I'll take a gamble on it and see how we go. Not all audiences are going to be as receptive to something like that. I think SaaS founders were, but I think having a reasonably clear idea of what this is going to be in the future, how it's going to be awesome and amazing in the future, and being able to communicate that effectively is really key as well. Coming back to the financial side of things, so what you often see, so what's talk about the steps on the ladder where you start off with a job and then you move into freelancing, and then from freelancing you either decide, look, do I take my knowledge and become a consultant and teach people how to do the thing, or do I package my knowledge up as a course and teach people how to do the thing at scale but at a much reduced price? Or do I continue doing the thing, but bring other people in underneath me to do it?
Build a business, yeah.
Well, and you go down kind of the agency route, or do you zero in on one little aspect of doing the thing and just do that over and over and over again, in which case you build a productized service. So move into consulting, move into courses, move into agency, move into a productized service. So all of those things generate revenue. All of those things take a lot of time. And what you often see is after doing one of those things, the next step is building a community after that. So you've got an audience, you've got an email list, you've got a bunch of customers, you've got a way of monetizing that. So you've got enough revenue in the business to be able to support a community manager or all the stuff that you want to do. Basically, like you need someone full-time whose job it is to keep the community running and keep connecting members and keeping everything running there. We didn't have that in place really, and we, like I said, we had a consulting business. We had some revenue from that. That kind of wound down a little bit. My business partner and I split ways. Just like I said, we had different visions for where we should go. So I found myself in a position where I was having to do all the community stuff, keep there's lots of calls and lots of posting and lots of research and lots of all that kind of stuff just to keep the community running. And it was this kind of really rough period where I didn't have enough time, effort, energy to grow the community because I was spending all of my energy running the community.
Yeah.
And that was just you're just running on a treadmill, just trying to keep up. You're not actually getting anywhere with it. So I had a few conversations with people in the group about what I should do and the direction we should go and all that kind of stuff. Luckily enough, at the time, I met someone who ended up hiring, who's now basically my head of marketing, but basically my business partner. She's got some equity now and all of that. And so I'm the kind of founder. I need someone else to bounce ideas off.
Yep.
I read something the other day saying that solo founder companies can actually end up being more successful. Good for them. I'm not one of those people. I need just that kind of interaction, or because I might have an idea, and when you actually vocalize it and explain it to someone, it might sound terrible.
Exactly.
So having that back and forth, having someone to bounce ideas off is critical, at least for me anyway. So that's been a massive help. So I think if anyone is going to start a community, I think we certainly underestimated how much work was involved in actually running the community. I think communities are wonderfully scalable, and when you've got thousands of members, it's not actually that much more work, but it is a lot of work when you've only got a few members to begin with. So I do think if we had our time over again, you definitely need a rock solid other source of revenue to begin with. Again, whether that's a productized service, which we have now, we have a done for you called email service, which kind of maybe I should talk about that actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So and also which one of those kind of directions would you kind of count that in? How did you think? How did it come into play? Because you were saying you were running on the treadmill. and now you're thinking, oh gosh, and now I need to add this other thing in place. So it's very the thin line. The line is thin between a distraction and actually something that really enables you to get to the next level. So how did you go into thinking about that kind of cold email service?
Well, so I think we kind of took a step back and we thought, okay, what do we actually, the Elon Musk has his grand plan. First you start with a really expensive car, and then you build a slightly cheaper car, and then you use the revenue from that to build an even cheaper mass market car. So there's kind of 3 steps there. So I wanted to try an audience first business model. So what you'll often see is like problem solution. Find a problem that people have, come up with a solution, tinker with that solution until you can get someone to pay for it. You've got product market fit, you've got a business, away you go. But I met a few people that did an audience first thing. So pick an audience of people that have a lot of different problems. And then pick out one of those problems that you could solve for that group of people. So everything that we do at Startup Source, if you imagine SaaS founders outside of Silicon Valley are right in the center of it. Now, those people have a whole lot of problems that they need to be solved. Let's pick one of them. Okay, they need more customers, need more revenue. Okay, what can we do to help those people get more customers? So one thing we could do is set up a community so they can ask for advice from other SaaS founders and learn how they're doing it, compare notes, and all that kind of stuff. That's one thing we could do. We've done a lot of cold email outreach. I think that's a really good marketing channel, especially when you're starting out. You don't have a huge amount of budget to spend. Okay, well, why don't we set up a course on how to do that? So we did. We've got a course on cold email outreach, and a few people in the group said, "That's great, Ryan. I don't have time to do this. Can you just do it for me?" And I said, "Okay, sure, we can do that." So now we've got community plus a course on cold email outreach, plus a done-for-you service on cold email outreach again. So if we kind of look at long-term what that vision is for the community is a big part of it. But really what we're doing is if you've got SaaS founders outside of Silicon Valley, circle in the middle, and then you look at all the things that you need to build a successful SaaS business around that. So there's community stuff, there's some learning stuff. So maybe there's more course material. Maybe we don't come up with all the courses. Maybe we find some other experts, or we source it from people within the community who have a lot of knowledge, but no easy way of turning that into useful learning materials. Maybe we build some other services around that. Or maybe we bring in some other service providers that are very good, and we have some way of vetting them or recommending them. We're starting to do that already. So we've got a list of service providers that have been recommended by other SaaS founders in the community, which kind of solves that problem of, I need a copywriter. Does anyone know someone who's good? You go to a Facebook group.
Putting yourself as a fulcrum of like actually providing value, regardless of how you end up delivering that value.
Well, and I think being a filter, because there's a lot of crap.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of BS out there. Yeah, exactly.
Find the best people and find a way to connect it all up. But just coming back to that thing, I think we probably started at step 4, which is the community. We didn't do steps 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And so we're having to go back and fill in the gaps there. So now that we've got a productized service that generates enough revenue, we can use that revenue to pay for salaries, and we're expanding the team at the moment. Probably hire a community manager pretty soon as well. We've got a course. Okay, great. Now what we can do is we can leverage that course to drive more members into the community. So everything is kind of now feeding into the community, but we didn't have any of that to begin with, and it's taken quite a while to build that, and it takes even longer to build all of that when you got to spend all your time running the community as well. So I think if I had my time over again, I probably would have started with content, build an email list, come up with some way of monetizing that, whether it's course, productized service, agency, even freelancer. And then once I had all of that in place and it was all ticking over, then adding a community on top of that it's almost like, they say you build your castle and then you dig a moat around it.
Sure.
I think when you've got a really vibrant community of people who, my favorite blog post on marketing is 1,000 True Fans. If you've never read that, Google it and check it out. Any creative endeavor, whether it's entrepreneurship or you're a musician or an artist or something like that, any creative endeavor, if you can find 1,000 people who just love what you're doing, you're fine. So we're kind of taking that approach here. So once you've got everything else in place, if you can find 1,000 people who love what you're doing and build a community and help them all kind of connect and interact, like that's really defensible. It's really difficult for some, they might be able to copy your service, they might be able to copy your product. Really difficult to copy a community. So
cool.
I think that's the approach that we're taking.
So in terms of like other maybe tips when it comes to, and then there's some practical things that I'd love to kind of get your take on. But So definitely, so 1,000 true fans, making sure that you have the audience before the community gets started. Totally understand that. In terms of like actually just you, in terms of where you go to learn this stuff, I mean, you're an expert in digital marketing. You've built and sold a company all around helping founders, SaaS founders, get better at skills that they don't necessarily have. Where do you go to learn about community management tactics, or learn strategy around how to how to run experiments for your community, or to get more people in, or to get more people active? Are there any specific resources that you either particularly rate, or that you actually use to like what's your community for community people? You know what I mean?
A whole list.
Yeah.
On the community side of things, admittedly, I don't know everything. I'm not an expert there. That's mostly come from mentors.
Okay.
When I was in Australia, there was a list of 100 mentors, and I kind of started in the top left.
Just went your way down.
I was able to learn a lot from those people. Yeah. The thing about communities is I think people fall into two categories. There are people who see value in being part of communities, or people who don't. Now, people who see value in being part of communities, part of lots of communities, there are communities out there about building communities. There are Facebook groups, there are Slack groups, there are forums, there are message boards, there are email lists. I think all good communities, though, it's they're around a particular topic or a group of people. In our case, it's SaaS founders outside of Silicon Valley, and then you unpack that down into sales and marketing and entrepreneurship and building a business, and there's a zillion other topics there. So in terms of where I go to learn about marketing stuff specifically, and granted, I haven't sort of taken my eye off that a little bit. I just haven't had time to do it. That's something that I want to get better at over the next few months. So there's a really good community called growthhackers.com. They've got some learning materials and stuff around that as well. That's really useful. Everything that's on CXL, Conversion Excel, is amazing. PayPlayer is a genius. There's a lot of conversion rate optimization stuff, which is converting people into actually becoming customers, which I think is really useful. I think Unbounce has an awesome blog. Neil Patel is, there's kind of a whole bunch of different blogs and stuff I could recommend, and maybe I could even put a list together or something around.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so then kind of more practical stuff in terms of like your tool set, what do you use? I know you said that it was a Slack community. So why Slack? Why not? Have you thought about Circle or Mighty Networks or any of these kind of dedicated ones? I know that you have some really interesting thoughts about why not Facebook groups, at least for this group. But what kind of went into the Slack decision, and do you like that decision, or are you thinking about other things?
So I don't want to give the wrong impression that I think Facebook groups are bad in any way.
No. For your purpose, exactly. It's for the right fit. Yeah.
So the thought process behind that is we're going after software as a service entrepreneurs. A lot of them use Slack and have Slack open in front of them all day long because that's how they communicate with their team. So I think the hardest thing is, like, if we picked a tool where they had to remember to go there and open it up, you're just not going to get the eyeballs. It's I think it's much better if they've already got an existing habit. That's where you are. If they've already got Slack open all day, that's where we need to be. If they've got Facebook open all day, that's where we need to be.
Exactly.
If they've got something else. So we looked at something like Mighty Networks. I've actually heard really good things about Mighty Networks, but the fear for us was just, is this another
nobody
thing
would use it?
Remember how to do? And a similar thing, like, we've heard good things about Discord, and I know a few people who run Discord groups, and that's great if you're the kind of person that's on Discord all the time. If you're not, you're having to start a whole new habit on top of everything else. I think that's too hard.
Are there other tools that you use that are central to the community that you're able to share?
So there's a couple of things. We use Zoom for a lot of calls and stuff like that. I use Calendly for scheduling stuff. I need to move beyond that. It's not enough. We've tried to use it in too many ways, and it's not. So we do need to have some. We're looking at Hey Summit actually for scheduling events. We do a lot of guest speakers and stuff like that quite regularly, and we need an easier way of booking that kind of stuff in. Trying to use Calendly for that just doesn't. It's not. Calendly's great for getting people to get on the call. But that's
the right tool for the right thing. That's what you're.
Exactly. We use MailChimp for sending out email newsletters. We might move from that at some point. It does the job for now.
Mhm.
One of the things that I have found is Slack's great, but having multiple channels, especially when you're organizing events and you've got to send reminders
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. So we always send an email plus Slack
Sure.
as well, rather than just relying on one.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Any kind of maybe final tips when it comes to I mean, we haven't even talked about how you're still on the road. You're still not you're still not back in Australia. But like any other kind of final tips, especially if you're thinking about creating a business that has a community aspect to it, especially while living on the road and doing it maybe either it's yourself or in a small team. Any final like words of wisdom that you'd share if someone's like in their mind they really want to do this, but they're not sure about when they should pull the lever or pull the trigger.
So I think a couple of things. If I was to give someone advice, so maybe we haven't touched on the whole kind of digital nomad building a business on the road thing. I'm in Argentina. I'm not going to go into that story because we probably don't have time for that. But the main reason I came here is it was number one on Nomad list for a little while in terms of the best cities to go. So
Right.
I think if you're going to build a business and you're not in Silicon Valley and you haven't raised a giant pile of money, moving somewhere where there's a low cost of living just extends that runway. You've got time to figure things out. And it gets a bit harder if you've got mortgage and a family and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't have any dependents, move somewhere. If you're in Australia, go to Southeast Asia. If you're in North America, go to South America. If you're in Europe, go to Eastern Europe. Like go somewhere. And you will find anyone under 30 who's been to university in the world speaks English now. Or speaks a little bit of English. You've got Google Translate, internet's everywhere. Like it's a lot easier to do it now than it was a generation ago. So I would move somewhere where the cost of living is really low. Keep your runway really long. I would start with something that you can monetize fairly easily. Pretty much anyone can work as a freelancer. If you've got a skill, you can find someone to, we've done a lot of cold email thing, and that's fascinating because everyone has an email address, and you change your email address less often than you change your actual physical address. So if you can send someone an email and explain how you can make their life better or easier, you can find someone who will pay you for your skill. If you can find someone who can pay you for your skill, then you can turn that from freelancing into a consulting business, into an agency, into a productized service, or into a course. And kind of expand things from there. But I think certainly moving somewhere where you can keep your cost of living low when you're just starting out is the fundamental first step, and something that I definitely recommend. Can be a little bit lonely. So if you are thinking about starting your own community, it's probably worth joining an existing community like mine if you're a SaaS founder, but there are lots of really good communities for entrepreneurs, people starting businesses where you can learn, but also find people, just to bounce ideas around, just to, find your tribe, find people who are like you. And that does help with, some of the isolation with living in a country where you don't have any kind of support network in place.
Yeah, no, that's a really good shout. I think a lot of people think about this idealized vision of being a digital nomad and going off on your own, and even in the language nomad, like if you are nomadic, you don't need anyone else. But at the end of the day, we all need people, and we all need our group or our fan base or our critics or what have you. So definitely something that maybe people don't realize until they're like they've 2 months into being in Chiang Mai and not actually having a social network yet. And yeah, it can be a very lonely experience. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for making the time. Peru also said, great listening to you, Ryan. So thanks again for watching Peru. But thanks again for just making a bit of time and chatting with us. If anybody is interested in learning more about Startup Sauce, you can head over to startupsauce.com, or you can drop Ryan an email at ryan@startupsauce.com. Thanks again, Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. It's been a pleasure.
See ya.